Son of the pilot of the ill-fated Cubana plane which crashed off Barbados 35 years ago calls for justice. Rain brings financial pain for Palmetto Street Mall vendors. And in sports, Barbados ready for tomorrow's do-or-die World Cup qualifier.
With the compliments of Globe Finance, those are the headlines of tonight's edition of the Evening News. Next on CBC.
Credible, balanced, committed. This is the CBC Evening News.
Good evening, I'm Pearson Bowen. This is the CBC Evening News. A Cuban national today urged the United States to apply justice and fairness in the way it treats his country. That was a clarion call from Wilfred Perez Rodriguez, son of the pilot of the ill-fated Cubana Flight 455, which crashed off Paynes Bay, killing all 78 people on board. Foreign Affairs Minister Maxine McLean led diplomats, political figures and other citizens during a wreath-laying ceremony at the Paynes Bay Monument as Bridgetown joined Havana and Caracas in observing the 35th anniversary of the Cubana airline crash. Remembering the tragic occasion, Mr. Rodriguez says the United States has continually treated Cuba harshly and that the Cubana incident has caused generations of innocent families to suffer. Meanwhile, he says one of the masterminds behind the brutal act is today free to walk the streets of Miami with no harassment.
Why the U.S. government has not taken him and extradited him to Venezuela, where he has pending legal proceedings for murders and other crimes? U.S. authorities may have strong reasons, but they are obliged to answer that. There can be no good terrorism and bad terrorism when it kills innocent human beings. Because if on one side, U.S. does not prosecute or extradite Posada Carriles, on the other is subjected to unfair imprisonment of fighting against terrorism to prevent crimes like the one that killed my father.
Mr. Rodriguez lauded the government and people of Barbados for their continued support, noting that Barbados demonstrated true friendship to Cuba by offering whatever assistance it could during the terrible period.
35 years ago, I heard the name of this country unfortunately associated with the terrible news of the death of my father. Within the days, I knew that at the time of the tragedy, dozen Barbadians, men and women, came to lend their helping hands to potential survivors of the tragedy. Thanks to the tireless efforts of the authorities of Barbados, along with the governments of Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana, to the direct perpetrators and the masterminds of the terrorist act were catched. Everything I keep for Barbados and its people is love and gratitude.
Mr. Rodriguez said as part of a week of activities, the Cuban Embassy will be hosting a panel discussion at the University of the West Indies CAFL campus tomorrow, where it is expected to lay out its case for the involvement of a network of intelligence agencies and embassies in the 1976 attack. Well, heavy rains this morning caused problems for some vendors in the Palmetto Street Mall in Bridgetown, especially those who sell clothing. They've complained that every time it rains, the roof leaks, causing flooding in their stalls. The vendors say they've taken their concerns to the manager of markets, noting that they suffer losses as a result of the damage which they cannot recover. The vendors who previously plied their trade north of the Parliament buildings on Palmetto Street and the immediate surrounding areas moved into their new surroundings in February, and at least 6 vendors sell clothing there. General Manager of Markets Henderson Graves is on record stating that he's aware of the problems being experienced with the roof and that efforts have been made to fix it, noting that a private contractor is working to have the problem rectified. A warning to parents to be very vigilant with their school children. That advice from the director of Pure Sex Center, Ambrose Carter, who says all the available evidence has shown that Barbadian children are engaging in sex at a very early age. He says that with the Caribbean having one of the highest prevalence rates for HIV/AIDS in the world, the behavior of our children must be closely monitored.
The emphasis basically has been on HIV and AIDS, so they know a lot about HIV and AIDS. But recent research has shown that they're not taught a lot about sex and the whole question of sexual behavior and activities from basically a pure perspective. Here at the Pure Sex Center, we push pure sex. And some research shows that 85% of the students in one study, they were sexually active. And a number of them believed that their hymen would still be intact if they practiced anal intercourse. So they thought they would still be virgins. And so with information like this, you have to be concerned.
Mr. Carter says we must teach our children about pure sex. In this regard, he believes that we must encourage them to wait for marriage, to abstain from negative sexual behavior, and to remain faithful. Well, work to improve the stalls at the Bridgetown Fishing Complex is progressing. It involves making the stalls more attractive and sanitary. 4 of them have been outfitted with glass cases for fisherfolk to display their fish. Another change is that there will be no scaling or boning of fish in the stalls. This will only be permitted in the processing hall, a development welcomed by the fisherfolk. Management of the Bridgetown Market, Keith Henry, says the improvements are to improve the industry, save water, and to make things more sanitary. He believes this would result in more pleasant surroundings and more Barbadians buying fish. Rheumatoid arthritis is largely undiagnosed in Barbados, but efforts are on to change this. Rheumatologist Dr. Cindy Flowers says there are high numbers of people with osteoarthritis, or the degenerative type that develops with age. However, she says it's the other types of the disease that officials have little knowledge of.
For lupus, we have a registry at the Chronic Disease Research Center, so we know there's several hundred, over 300 patients with lupus. Now, for the other things, we have work to do. So rheumatoid arthritis typically affects 1% of the population. I've probably seen between 500 to 600 cases of rheumatoid arthritis, but that is underdiagnosed because a young person with joint pain thinks maybe they've exerted themselves too much, so they don't think they have a disease and may not present for investigation. And an older person will attribute it to old age and again not present for investigation. So that is an area where we know that there are undiagnosed people on the island with.
Dr. Flores' specialty is pain management, and she says she focuses much of her attention on lupus and its treatment.
That condition, in addition to being a form of arthritis, is potentially life-threatening. But now we want to turn our attention to getting a database of all the rheumatic conditions, and rheumatoid arthritis, which we expect to affect 1% of the population, is next in line to be targeted. And it's about public awareness as well. So people would present for investigation and diagnosis.
Well, arthritis will be the focus of tonight's Healthwise, which comes later in the news. Minister of Industry and Small Business Dennis Kelman wants more local businesses to be more environmentally friendly, and he's encouraging them to use renewable energy, as this promotes not only a sustainable economy but a green one as well.
We saw it at Foursquare when we saw how the REM was painting. They were using natural gas. Today we are at banks, they're using natural gas, and it tells me that we have to ensure that the capacity of natural gas is right if we are going to be environmentally friendly. Banks is doing it, Foursquare is doing it, and a lot of other companies are doing it. So we have to make sure that we have that supply.
The legacy of excellence is expected to continue during this year's NIFCA, with the performing arts preliminaries starting at the Combermere School this weekend. Chief Cultural Officer at the National Cultural Foundation, Andrea Wells, says the volume and caliber of the entries have increased.
We are seeing some very, very interesting interpretations and representations of various themes through these 3 art forms. We are seeing an increase, it has been a tremendous increase in the number of musical entries this year, and a lot of creative work coming to our attention via dance. In drama speech, there has been an upsurge, a continuing growth in the spoken word at NIFCA, with a lot of veterans, but also some new voices coming on the scene. So it will make for 2 weekends of really exciting performances.
Alex McDonald, the Managing Director of Line, formerly Cable and Wireless, which has sponsored NIFCA for more than 3 decades now, says it was money well spent.
The cultural expression of a nation is something that should be fostered and encouraged to grow. So again, this is probably close to our 30th year that we have underscored our commitment to making this a reality. So even as you came in this morning, you would have felt an excitement in the air.
Well, the finals of the Line Performing Arts will be held at the Frank Cullimore Hall, November 1st to Friday, November 4th.